Everyone has the right to free speech, but I don't believe that hate speech is free speech. The whole point of free speech is to have intellectual discourse and to have intellectual progress. The right wing, the far right in the USA and Trump and MAGA movement, their free speech has complete double standards. It's free speech when it suits them.
Yeah.
It's free speech when it aligns with their views. Otherwise, it's a prisonable offense.
So what started off as an innocent act of putting up a flag to support the women's
Yeah.
football team, now what you're saying has been weaponized.
They've hijacked the British flag. They're trying to make it into a symbol of hatred, a symbol of division, and a symbol of, as long as, if you're anything other than white, then you don't belong here, which is complete nonsense.
They actually build their foundation on, we want to revive or we want to preserve British values.
I have yet to hear a coherent answer about what is British culture. What is the thing that they feel that they are losing? Whose fault is it that Christianity is declining? Why don't you go to the churches rather than, going to these protests and organizing these hate marches? If Jesus was here, right, how would they treat Jesus? Muslims are upholding Christian values more than the far right. So don't tell me that Muslims don't contribute and Muslims don't integrate. This is a pivotal moment in the whole of the Western world, actually. The kind of hatred that is being spread is going to lead to violence.
So in the last few weeks, or the last few months actually, there's been a series of major events which have actually proven to be pivotal, and they sort of indicate a sudden rise in the far-right sentiment in this country. But in this podcast, what we want to do is we want to unpack, is this really so sudden? Or is this sentiment something that has been brewing for a very long time? So, for example, in the last couple of months, there's been flags that have been put up, the St. George's flag, the Union Jack. We've seen it increase and increase to the point now where if we drive down the street, we'll see it near enough on every lamppost, even on roundabouts, etc. Now, this started off in July when the Lionesses, the England's football team, when they were playing in the Euros. But since then, it's sort of been weaponized, you could say, but it started in Birmingham. There was a group that started putting this up and they said that we are protecting English culture and identity. And this escalated on Facebook. People love this idea and now everyone's doing it. Now, the question is this provocation or is this patriotism? Because, of course, the other side, they're saying they're intimidated by it and we're going to unpack this. Then this also culminated on the 13th of September, Tommy Robinson's Unite the Kingdom March, which saw over 100,000 reported by the mainstream media. 150,000 reported by the police, and Tommy Robinson himself is reporting up to 3 million people marching on the streets of London. So they were also waving these flags, and just 3 days before this, Charlie Kirk, an activist in America, conservative activist, he was assassinated, he was shot dead. So even in this march, the Unite the Kingdom March, they were shouting, chanting Charlie Kirk. So what is actually happening? We're going to unpack that today. So we're joined with Atif Rashid, who's a journalist and he's worked in the BBC before. So what is going on?
Well, that is the question, isn't it? Like, this, you mentioned this has been going on, apparently it just started, it was sudden, but this kind of far-right rhetoric and sentiment has been happening for decades, actually. And it has come to a fore in the last few weeks, yes, but we saw, in the 1970s there were riots in the country. Even in the 1930s there was Oswald Mosley, British Union of Fascists, right? So this is been going on for decades. This kind of sentiment, probably as far as human history goes, right? This hate and this division. But I grew up in the 1990s, and I remember there was a lot of anti-racism sentiment. If you were labelled racism, it was a really, shocking thing, and you were really scared to be labelled a racist. And so it was actually fairly peaceful time. There were racist incidents here and there. So I could have never imagined what is happening today, right? Today, the far right is emboldened. Today, racism is, like basically a badge of honor almost. It's like, this is something to be proud about. We are taking back our country, whatever that means. We're going to unpack that, right? So, and this has all come to the fore in the last few weeks. We saw with these flags, and they say it's patriotism, and they say we're reclaiming our country. What does that even mean? Who are you reclaiming the country from? Who's taking your country? Is this insecurity? Like, what is, and if you want to go down that route, it's Britain who's actually taken territory and land in history. But let's not go there, right? If you want to talk about reclaiming land. So the thing is, they say our culture is under attack. We're reclaiming our country. Immigrants have to go out and they're a threat to the country. Whereas they don't provide any proof, for example, or anything substantial there. And these flags, everyone must have seen it, right? You can't not have seen it unless you haven't left your house in the last 2 weeks. I was driving down my local town and I saw the British flag. Looks amazing, very nice. You know, I'm British. I love the country. I love my flag. I'm patriotic. And I don't have any issue. In fact, I love to see the British flag, the Union Jack flying
So
high.
you weren't intimidated by it?
I wasn't intimidated, right? And why should I be? But when you then realize that what the sentiment behind it is, what the motive is, right? It is to try to intimidate immigrants and kind of make this kind of sentiment that this is our country,
Yeah.
you don't belong here, right? And what they've actually done is they've hijacked the British flag and made it a symbol of trying to make it a symbol of hate. Whereas, what is the British flag? What are British values? What should it represent? What does it represent? It represents respect. It represents freedom, respect for and freedom to practice your faith and your beliefs. It represents multiculturalism. That's what makes Britain great. They're trying to make it into a symbol of hatred, a symbol of division, and a symbol of, as long as, if you're anything other than white, then you don't belong here, which is complete nonsense. And the thing is, Hope Not Hate, which is an anti-racism charity, they actually exposed who organized this and what the motives were behind it. It was an attempt to intimidate. It was an attempt to kind of, proclaim to take back the country or whatever, right?
Right.
And the people who organized it, it was Andy Saxon, who is basically a member of the EDL and English Defence League and Britain First, well-known racist, fascist groups. And he's also a friend of Tommy Robinson, who we know is a far-right figure, racist, Islamophobic, very, very clear, right?
It's on record. Yeah.
It's on
We'll go
record. We
into
know,
that as well.
stuff that he said. And then apparently Britain First leader, Paul Golding, apparently he said that he donated 75% of their flag stock for this operation Raise the Colours.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's being organized by these kinds of figures who are well-known like far-right racists and Islamophobes, then what do you think the purpose of this is? Right? And the thing is, right, you mentioned that it started when the Lionesses won the World Cup, right? Okay, great. But the actual flags went up like a week or so, I think, after. I don't think it was immediate, right?
Yeah,
But my point is that why now, right? Why did it suddenly... For me, I was out in the town, I was driving through my town, and I was like, suddenly there's all these flags, right? And I was okay, fine. But I was like, have I missed a national holiday or something? Like, is there some celebration, this British celebration, which I've missed? And then I realized it was these lot who are actually putting it up. So, even when the Queen died, I don't remember there being that many flags. Even when England is playing the World Cup, you see it, but I don't see that many.
Yeah.
So what kind of patriotism is this? They frame it as patriotism.
Of course.
Actually, it is provocation. It is racism. It's hijacking and weaponizing the symbol of the British flag to further their own racist agenda.
So what started off as an innocent act of putting up a flag to support the women's football team has now, what you're saying, has been weaponized by the far right.
Yeah.
And I think what would be good to mention here is that there's sort of been a sort of conflation or two incidents that are happening at the same time. So these flags are starting to go up all of a sudden everywhere. On the other hand, we also have these anti-immigration marches and protests that have been going on outside these hotels that have been housing asylum seekers and all of that, right? The illegal ones. So because both of these things are happening at the same time, so you have the anti-immigration sentiments and you have these flags all of a sudden going up as a symbol of, British identity and British culture and values, all of this. You touched on the question, what are British values? But also now let's go on to immigration. So even the march that happened on 13th of September, one of the biggest things that Tommy Robinson and the other people, even Elon Musk and all the others that were there, they were talking about the topic of immigration, illegal immigration to be specific. So let's talk about that. Let's unpack that.
Let's unpack immigration, but let me just say a couple more things. It wasn't just flags that went up, right? It was St. George's crosses on the roundabouts.
Yeah,
I just want to talk about the logic of that.
Yeah.
Why would you paint your country's flag on roundabouts on the floor? In some places when they want to condemn a flag or denigrate it, they put it on the floor, they burn it, or they trample upon it, or they step on it. What kind of respect is this for your flag, right? Like, fly it high, but why are you putting it on the floor?
In fact, when these flags, they started going up in Birmingham City Council, and when the council actually ordered them to be taken down, they weren't doing it because they were against against the far right or whatever. There's actually, I've got it here, the Highways Act 1980 states that it is an offence to affix items to structures on the highway without the consent of the highway authority without reasonable excuse.
Exactly, it's going to distract the drivers,
of course.
right?
So they were doing this everywhere. The reason why they were told to be taken down wasn't because of anything else apart from this. So yeah.
No, it's exactly. So it shows that they're actually hiding their racism and their Islamophobia and their far right dangerous views behind patriotism. They've weaponized patriotism. But anyways, that's that. Immigration, right? They always rail against immigration, and the thing is that immigration is not the real issue this country is facing. They've made it seem like that is the biggest
It's
danger.
a scapegoat, right?
It is complete scapegoat,
Yeah.
right? They say it's an invasion. How is this an invasion, right? Just like it's Britain who's been invading the last few decades, right, or even centuries, right? And like, if you look at the figures, they go completely against what they say about immigration as a threat. Look, we have cost of living crisis going on. People can't afford to eat. People can't afford to buy their groceries. People cannot afford to pay their bills. The amount of people using food banks now is skyrocketing, right? And you're seeing those more and more food banks open because people can't afford the basic necessities. That's what the anger is really about.
Yeah.
But what they're actually using Muslims and immigrants for is to scapegoat and distract from the real issues this country is facing. And when politicians do it, they do it as a distraction to divert attention from the failure of their policies.
Of course.
And when the far right do it, it's because it's easy to scapegoat and blame minorities, and also the kind of racism which is already in them, right? They have an excuse now to kind of, spread their divisive and racist and, harmful views, and make minorities take the blame for what's gone wrong in this country. Whereas if you look at immigration and the statistics, studies have shown that immigration to this country is broadly in line with every other country in the world. And it's 15% of the population in Britain is foreign born. Only 15%. And if it's an invasion, it should be like 50%. Like the whole country's been taken over.
From the way they portray it, it would make, like, obviously people think that it's way more, but it's only 15%.
Exactly, it's only 15%. That's by the Migration Observatory, which is like a body of Oxford University, right? And they did this study. 15% are foreign born, and that's the same as the USA. It's less than Canada. It's less than Ireland, Germany, and Spain. And most of the people who are coming to this country, this is government statistics, most of them, about 70%, are workers. They're coming here to work on worker visas, or they're students. And the immigrants who are coming to work, what are they doing? They're paying back into the economy. They're serving the country, or they're filling jobs, and they're paying their taxes. And the ones who are students, if you've been to university, you know how high tuition fees are for people in this country.
Yeah.
For international students, they're like way more.
Like 3 times, I think.
Yeah, 3 times. Well, like God knows how much, right? Way more.
Yeah.
So they're coming here, they're paying into the country.
Yeah.
So immigrants are actually giving back to this country. And not just that, there's also the Office of Budget Responsibility, a government department, government office, which basically they actually showed that over their lifespan, skilled workers who come here as immigrants, they actually contribute more to the British economy than they take, and way more than a typical UK resident. So when immigrants come, they're actually giving back to the country, or they're actually contributing to the UK economy. They're not all of them are coming and usurping the resource of the country and just living off benefits. Those are a minority. And the other thing is, in 2024, it was about 1 million or so immigrants came to this country, according to the statistics. Guess how many were asylum seekers? Do you want to take a guess? It was less than 40,000 out of 1 million.
Wow.
Right? They're making it seem like everyone's here illegally. Everyone's here to live off in hotels and live off the country and live off their taxes. It was only 40,000. And not only that, the UK budget last year was 1.28 trillion. Out of that, what was spent on refugees was only 2.8 billion. And that amounts to 0.2%, 0.22% of the entire UK budget for the year. They're making it seem that it's like 5%, 10% of the UK budget that is being spent on them. It's nothing. It's less than 1%. So they've kind of made this whole straw man argument, this whole ghost, which doesn't even something which doesn't even exist. And the other thing is, right, that why are they railing against immigrants if they feel that immigrants are being treated better than them, or if they're being given like benefits and gifts, right? Like for example, if I give you a gift, and somebody else was like, they feel that was meant for them, does it make sense for him to go and rail against you and criticize you and tell you to
Of
give
course
it?
not.
Or does it make sense to come to
Yeah.
me and say, why did you give it to him? That was meant for
Exactly.
me. It
Exactly.
doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they should be railing against the government and the policies,
Yeah.
rather than being racist and anti-immigrant and going, and these are vulnerable people who are coming from war-torn countries. By the way, the countries which our government has created wars in, has bombed, has destabilized, either overtly or covertly. Like we know that they were, arming Syrian rebels. We know about the
Yeah.
Iraq War. We know they bombed Libya. We know their policies in the Middle East. We know how they're supporting Israel in this genocide in Gaza, right? And they've created the conditions. The Syrian refugee crisis 2015 was the worst refugee crisis since World War II, and that created a huge influx of immigrants and refugees. Why is the far right not condemning the wars that are creating these refugees? And why are they, rather than railing against immigrants, they should be not just the wars that are creating these refugees, the money, the billions that are being spent to carry on the Ukraine war. They should be saying that stop the Ukraine war and stop giving so much aid to Ukraine because this is our money and we need it. They should be saying that. They should be saying that rather than provoking the war and pouring fuel on the fire,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Which our leaders are doing, right?
Yeah.
And giving more money. They should be pushing for peace, pushing for negotiation, pushing for some compromise. But you don't hear much of that. And so the far right would be way better placed to criticize the government policies rather than the refugees that it's creating, right?
Yeah.
They don't talk about that enough, right? And the other thing is that, apparently we're taking in so many refugees. Do you know the country that's taking in the most refugees? It's not the UK. Nowhere near. The UK takes, last year 40,000, right? Iran is the country in the world which has taken in and takes in the most refugees, 3.8 million people.
Whoa.
And we've taken in 40,000, we're in uproar. And not just that, there's a double standard here as well. It's not just refugees they're against, it's clearly against Muslims or brown people. Because when the Ukraine war started, the British government started schemes and, was very happy to invite Ukrainian refugees, rightly so, because they're fleeing a war.
Yeah.
And there wasn't any uproar. There's 200,000 Ukrainian refugees who have come to this country. How many Gazan refugees have come? How many people from Gaza? There was 30 to 50. There was one family actually who came. They came through the Ukrainian scheme, right? And the judge ruled that was fine, right? And there was uproar in parliament, right? Kemi Badenoch and even Keir Starmer, they agreed. The one time they agree is when some Gazans, some Palestinians who are fleeing a genocide come through the system, right? So they agree that that's wrong, and so they condemned it. And then a few weeks ago, there was 30 to 40 children from Gaza who needed treatment. They were coming in. Again, the far right, there was uproar. There's 30 to 50. Why isn't there uproar when there's Ukrainians coming in? Why? Because there's double standard and it's racism. Because it's the wrong type of immigrant coming, right? And not just that, they had a Ukrainian Homes for Ukraine scheme, I think it was called, where they were actually paying £350 to anyone in the UK who would house them, who would house these Ukrainians. They were paying the British public to house these refugees, but you haven't done it for any other country.
Yep.
So that just shows that
it's a bit of a double standard.
It's a double standard. It's racist policies, almost.
Definitely.
So this was happening, and then they say, they're living in luxury 4-star hotels, 5-star hotels. They're not living in luxury. Like, first of all, the government has a duty to house them somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And they're only getting 50 or less than £50 a week to live on, right? No one can live on £50 a week. You see how expensive groceries are, right? You see how expensive everything is.
Not in this economy anyway.
Exactly, not in the maybe like
maybe,
50 years ago, right? But they're living on pittance. They're not living in luxury. Remember, some of them, their families are still back, in the war-torn countries. They're coming with a lot of trauma. They're coming with a lot of shock. They're not coming here to live in luxury. They're coming here to flee war. They're vulnerable people, and then they come here, and then they get this treatment from the right-wing elements of our country. It's complete injustice.
No, that's a really good point. You touched on policies, and if we touch on politics in general right now, it's a bit of a tangent, but far right isn't just what we see with like Tommy Robinson, the radical far right. It's also like reform movement, the Reform Party, Nigel Farage. Then we have across Europe, across the West. So we have Meloni in Italy, we have Le Pen in France, we have AFD in Germany. So if we just touch on this, so what is this now? Rise of the far right in across the Europe and across the West, not just the UK.
Yeah, I think you're seeing the far right kind of rise across the Western world,
Yeah,
and we see Trump's back in office,
yeah,
right? He had one term, and then they voted for Biden, and now he's back.
he's back. Yeah,
That means that there's support for these kinds of policies and these kinds of uh, this kind of like sentiment, and this kind of politics as well.
yeah,
And I think there's a few reasons for that, right? There's definitely concerns about immigration and the resources and the economy, right? I mean, I'm saying that that concern is misplaced, right? But obviously, you know, immigrants are easy to blame. The minorities are easy. It's like the bully, right?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah,
they're just a few, so let's just put the blame on them, right? And also, if there's someone different from you, it's like human nature as well. You're going to be suspicious of them.
yeah,
So you're just giving into like, it's just base politics, it's base human nature, really.
yeah,
And so, but there is that concern. It's always an economic concern.
yeah, yeah,
Obviously, like when you don't have enough money in your pocket, you're getting poorer and poorer,
yeah,
and the economy isn't working for you. You're
yeah,
not getting a job, or your job isn't paying enough for you to meet your needs, or you're having to take 2 or 3 jobs. Then obviously, there's going to be anger, and then for the politicians, it's very convenient to direct that anger towards minorities, towards anybody other than themselves.
yeah,
Whereas a lot of the wealth in these countries is actually being held in offshore accounts. In the UK, it's estimated about £500 billion is in tax havens. That's UK money which should be spent on our public services. Like, I agree with the far right in the sense that public services are declining, the country's getting poorer,
yeah,
groceries are going up. I agree. That anger or that concern is justified, right? I'm with them. I'm like, look, I'm with them in that sense
yeah,
only,
yeah, yeah,
right?
of course.
I agree that something needs to happen, but then direct your anger towards those policies, not towards
In the right places,
in the right place.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So that's why, like, if you want to remedy or kind of counter far right
yeah,
sentiment or
yeah,
like politics, then you have to fix the economy. You have to improve living standards.
of
You have
course.
to reinvest in public services, and
Yeah,
that's where this anger is. They see the shops and on the high streets being boarded up. I
yeah,
get sad when I go to my local towns and villages, and I see it boarded up and shut. And that shows there's a decline in the high street and a decline in the country as
no,
well.
of course.
And so obviously that would, you'd have some resentment or some hurt for that if you love this country, right?
So the sentiments are valid, but the solution is not right. What they're doing by blaming immigrants and all
Exactly.
of this.
The solutions are right. They need to be talking about, look, stop. Like they're cutting public services. Keir Starmer, like recently, I think he backtracked after, but he said he was going to cut the winter fuel allowance. He was going to cut disability benefit, but I think he backtracked after getting backlash, right? Whereas, how much are they investing in weapons and arms? I think he was saying, like, I think 5% of the GDP they're going to invest in the next 5 or 10 years, right? It's crazy.
Yeah,
Your country's suffering, and yet you're investing so much more in weapons, in arming, countries to the teeth.
yeah,
And a
yeah,
lot of those countries, well, I don't know about a lot, but look, for example, some countries they're oppressing other countries. That's who you're backing,
yeah,
right? So it's completely misplaced, their anger. And it's been like, we had a financial crash in 2008, then we had the Syrian refugee crisis, we've had Brexit, and then we had a pandemic. All of those had an impact on the economy,
yeah,
and so obviously people are going to feel the pinch, and they're going to feel the hurt, they're going to be
course.
angry. But the other thing is that there's also an Islamophobic industry at play here. There's actually a book written, is Nathan Lean. He wrote about the Islamophobic industry, and apparently like £200 million are being spent in America, or have been spent, to demonize Muslims, to
Whoa.
to kind of make Muslims seem like dangerous and harmful and
Mm-hmm.
terrorists. And so that is a whole mix where there's an economic issue, there's kind of a movement to demonize Muslims and Islam, and also you know, like play is kind of playing this politics of hate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the shocking thing is actually that younger voters are also like voting for far right parties.
Yep.
Yeah, so what I was saying is that this is a really dangerous moment for just the UK, not just the UK, but the Western world as a whole. We see Trump, right, and
Yeah.
his policies, how he's trying to clamp down on immigration, the rhetoric of the far right, extremely dangerous. You're causing more and more hate. And the scary thing is that younger voters seem to be voting for these far right parties as well because they see their
Mm-hmm.
future fading away.
Yeah.
And they see, like when the circumstances are extreme, when the economic situation is so bad, and when you can't see a future, then you're going to vote extreme as well
Yeah.
because the parties have failed you, the
Yeah.
conservatives,
Of
and their
course.
decades of just like destroying this country,
Yeah.
right? Because what have they like? You saw how, for example, during the pandemic, they were partying, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the policies that they implemented, there was a lot of what you could call corruption, right? There were like contracts given to MPs, and like there's also this kind of intermingling in between business and politics, right? And then when the public sees that the rich and the elite are getting away with certain things, and they've got their money hidden away in tax havens, or
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
avoiding paying
Puts
tax,
them
right?
off. Yeah.
So what do you expect, right? They're going to vote for someone extreme like Nigel Farage, who claims to be working or speaks for the common man,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
who's like who rails against the billionaires and this and that, and and what do you expect young people to do, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lesson that we can learn from 1930s actually, just before World War II. This moment has existed before. In the 1930s, we saw a similar thing happening across Europe. We saw, far right parties gaining ground. Obviously, we saw the Nazi Party, we saw Mussolini. In the UK, there was Oswald Mosley, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And like I mentioned, he was the head of the British Union of Fascists. He was like anti-Semitic. He was basically a Nazi,
Yeah.
right? And he was doing his rallies, and the British government at the time, it was a national government. There was a union of the parties. They actually did a really good job in countering that. And what they did is they started improving the economy, right? And they made the conditions better for the people, right? Number one. Number two, they banned any radical fascist or racist rallies or groups or even symbols or political uniforms. They banned them, right? And so they clamped down on that. And the third thing they did was they stopped their involvement in foreign wars or supporting those kinds of wars. And because what happens is when your country is fighting a war against another people, then that automatically creates resentment against those people.
Of course. Yeah.
And then so obviously you're going to have hatred towards foreigners and other people who aren't like you. So these three things actually went a long way to remedying the far right kind of sentiment that was growing in that country. So Britain generally has a good history of fighting racism and extremism and far right kind of politics. But right now it's a really dangerous moment because we're seeing that I can't see how the government or the policies are fighting that kind of sentiment, because what we're seeing is Starmer recently said, he said, what did he say, that this country is becoming an island of strangers. That's literally the rhetoric of the far right.
Yeah.
Now, why they're adopting that? They're scared that they're losing their votes to right-wing parties and policies.
Yeah.
So they feel the whole political climate is shifting to the right.
Yeah.
And so even the moderate parties or the left-wing parties, they feel they have to be shifting to the right as well. So I don't see anything coming to kind of push back at that. And the irony is actually that like the only person I saw was Jeremy Corbyn, who was really doing this. Like he stood for something. He stood for something, and he's basically a socialist, right? So he would have invested much more in public services. So the far right would have been better to vote for him.
Yeah.
Because he would have actually fixed the economy. He would have stopped the wars.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And it's ironic that they're actually turning to they turn to the Tories, who they think are right wing, or they turn to Reform UK, right? And but Corbyn has just been left by the wayside, right? So this is the climate that we're seeing. Sadly, the government isn't doing enough, and they're kind of adopting. Like Starmer did come out and say, "Oh, the flag cannot be hijacked, and we need to take back the flag." Fair enough. Okay, that's good. That's a start. But why did you say the other thing before?
Yeah.
Right? And why are you not investing in the country? And why are you not you spending so much on weapons and on the defense budget.
Yeah.
And people, and like I spoke to Hamza Yusuf, the Scottish MP, who was the very first Muslim leader for Western nation. He was the first minister of Scotland. He actually said that he hasn't spoken to any pollster who doesn't think that Nigel Farage won't be either the next prime minister or at least the next leader of the opposition. And we can see that this is happening. The far right is gaining ground, and the Reform UK is gaining ground as well. And it's a scary time.
Yeah.
And we know that they're actually an anti-immigrant party. A lot of what they say is very racist as well.
Yeah.
So this is a dangerous moment for Muslims. There's a dangerous moment for the country.
Yeah.
Not just for Muslims, because people need to realize that this is not just immigrants going to be hurt. This is not just Muslims going to be hurt. When you create the climate of hate and division, your country is going to disintegrate.
Of course.
So anyone who loves this country, anyone who's truly patriotic and British and loves their nation should be worried and should stand up against this kind of politics of hate.
Of course. So these far right parties that you're talking about, they actually build their foundation on we want to revive or we want to preserve British values and British identity and our culture and all of these things. Now, going back to the 13th of September protest that happened, the big march that happened, Unite the Kingdom, right? It's actually being called, Tommy Robinson himself called this the MAGA of England, okay? So in that, there was, according to him, over 1 million people, according to, like I said, the police, about 150,000 people. They were all marching, mainly what they say against immigration, but I think we've covered that pretty well. But the other main notion that they were talking about was preserving British values, and we want our country back. The first question is back from whom? Like back from what? Okay, what do they want it back from? Secondly, what are British values? So I've just got here, he himself said in a podcast with Patrick Bet-David, it just came out a couple of days ago, maybe even yesterday, but he said that we lost our pride, identity, culture, and belief. He said that prior to this march, we lost our pride, identity, culture, and belief, these 4 things he mentioned. But then he said, on that day, on the 13th of September, I saw a whole array, a large majority of proud men there to reclaim the British identity. So what exactly is this? What are they talking about? What are British values? And do they themselves abide by these British values?
Yeah, well, exactly. What are British values? If you ask them, they can't give you a coherent answer. I have yet to hear a coherent answer about what is British culture. What is the thing that they feel that they are losing? It doesn't even make sense. Like, tell me tangibly, what is it? I was listening to LBC, right? And somebody was on making this argument that, yeah, we're losing our culture, this, that, and at the end he's like, oh, I just want to have my Sunday roast.
Yeah.
And the presenter herself, she said that, okay, this has taken a weird turn, so she cut him off, right? It's just absurd. Who is taking your Sunday roast dinner off your table? Are immigrants coming into your house and taking it? Who's stopping you from doing that? No one is stopping you from doing that. So really, it's almost an insecurity as well, that we're losing, our history, our culture. Somebody said that we're losing our story. But is that the fault of immigrants, or is that your own fault? Like, who is stopping you from going to the church? They say Christian values.
Yeah.
They say we want Christian values back.
Yeah.
Like, how many of those 150,000 people on Saturday who marched last Saturday went to church the next morning, right? They were probably too drunk, right? Because this is what they do.
That's a very good point, yeah.
It's like football hooliganism, right? They're going and having beer, they're going to the pubs. No one's stopping you from going to the pubs. Go to the pub. I'm not stopping you. Who's calling for the shutdown of pubs? Go do what you want. That's your life, your culture. Okay, fine. No one's stopping you from doing that. And the thing is, what are British values? The 5 British values they teach at schools, which is government mandated, right? Is the rule of law. It's mutual respect. It's democracy. It's tolerance of faiths and beliefs. And it's individual liberty. Now, take these 5 values and apply them to the far right. Apply them to Tommy Robinson. They don't have respect for the rule of law. They don't have respect for other cultures or faiths or beliefs. They don't have tolerance of other faiths or cultures or beliefs. They don't really believe in democracy either, because Elon Musk, who spoke, for the rally, he was like, take down the country, oust Starmer. Basically, he was saying things along these lines, right? And they don't have respect for individual liberty either. Because, like, if an immigrant or if a Muslim wants to practice or live his life a certain way, that's his individual liberty. What's it to you? He's not imposing on you. So, and the thing is, what are British values like? I'm British, you're British. I've lived here my whole life, and being British culture is having tea in the afternoon, right? That tea, which is basically, by the way, grown in Sri Lanka or India, right?
Yeah.
Like Ceylon tea, right? It's having fish and chips. It's having a stiff upper lip. That's known
Yeah.
to be British. It's having this dry humor. It's being polite.
Yeah.
I deem that to be more British than what these guys do,
Yeah.
right? Being polite, I feel, is a British value. Being inclusive, being charitable. Britain is a charitable nation. We take care of our sick. We take care of our disabled. We take care of our elderly, right? That's a Christian value. That's what Christian and British values are. And they talk about Christianity. If Jesus was here, right, how would they treat Jesus? In the Christian narrative, in the Christian story, his parents were escaping the persecution of King Herod, who had heard that the King of the Jews was coming, so he wanted to kill, babies, right? He deemed it as a threat. They were escaping persecution, and according to the Christian account, he was born in a stable. There was nowhere for him to stay. These refugees who are coming, they're fleeing persecution as well. And now you're giving them no place to stay. So there's no Christian values in what they're preaching. Christianity is about compassion, about love, about taking care of people.
Yep.
Jesus would be looking at them. Do you think he would identify himself with these types of people? I think not. So that's what British values are, and that's what British culture is. And these guys, it's funny, I saw a social media video where a guy carrying the St. George's flag, right?
Yeah.
He was going eating what was it, onion bhaji from some Indian stall, right?
Yeah.
On one hand, they said we get all the immigrants out.
Yeah.
On the other hand, they're happy to eat Indian food, eat Chinese food, eat tacos.
Yeah.
You know, they don't give it a second thought. So that's the kind of the illogical mindset of the far right, which I just can't understand.
If we also bring in integration now as well, so these extreme radical far right people, they're very much against Islam as a religion itself, right? So if someone was to say that Islam itself is against British values or it's against integration, how would you respond to that?
I'd say that look at the Muslims. There's so many Muslims here, right? And if they were against British values, they wouldn't be working in every single sector of society
And contributing.
and
Yeah.
contribute. There's been a lot of reports out in the last few years that Muslims are actually the most charitable group in the UK. They donate £2 billion to charity every single year. £2 billion, right? So don't tell me that Muslims don't contribute and Muslims don't integrate. If you're donating, money is the thing which you hold most dear to you.
Yeah.
And Muslims are charitable people. And not just that, by the way, there's a whole history of Muslims contributing, Muslims literally fighting and dying for this country. There's 5.5 million Muslims fought with the Allies in World War II. More than 1 million were killed. Muslims were fighting alongside you. Many of them work in the NHS. The NHS is run a fifth of it by foreign workers. So how can you say that Muslims aren't integrating? Muslims are a threat to this country. Prominent Muslims like I mentioned, Hamza Yusuf, Sadiq Khan, Baroness Wasi. These are Muslims, visible Muslims, and they're public servants. They've been serving the country, and you don't end up being the longest serving mayor of London, Sadiq Khan, without doing something right. People are voting for him for some reason, right? Obviously, every leader has his critics, right?
Yeah.
And every leader should be scrutinized. But at the end of the day, he's been the mayor of London for the longest time. So, and also, like, what is integration? Is it like going to pubs, going to concerts, going to clubs and dancing and partying and drinking alcohol? Since when is that integration? If you want to do it, then you can do it. Muslims aren't stopping you from doing that. If me as a practicing Muslim, I don't want to do that, but I'll drink tea. I'll drink tea with you. That's a British thing to do.
Have scones.
I'll have scones, exactly, right? And I've got a gluten allergy, so maybe not scones, but if it's a gluten-free scone, I'll have it, right? But do you get what I mean? The humor that I have, I think, is dry humor. Is you have a stiff upper lip, right? That's the thing which I deem or identify with being British. So when it comes to integration, right, like for Muslims, what is integration? Like I mentioned, it's not going partying, going to going to pubs, drinking, going to clubs, right? Integration and true integration, like what should integration be? Integration shouldn't just be, oh, this is our culture and this is the way we want to live our life. Integration to a country, it should be, what are you giving to the country? What value are you giving to the country?
Yeah.
Rather than what you are taking. Because like going to the pubs and drinking, you know how much that costs the NHS, right? You know how much how much resources it takes from the country and how much a burden it is. I don't think that's I don't think that's good integration. That's got nothing to do with integration. That's fine, you live your culture, that no one's stopping you, right? But as a Muslim, true integration is about being charitable, serving the country, volunteering. I've been with Muslim groups to do volunteering, do homeless feeding, do tree planting, do flood relief efforts. This is what true integration is. It's about working in the NHS. It's about being good to people. It's being, and they say that, okay, look, the one thing I agree with, they say, oh, they come here, they don't know English, they don't know our culture. And, whoever comes here, they do have to go through life in the UK, that program, which they have to go through before they can get accepted, right? And so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And everyone who comes here, they should learn the language. They should learn, every country does have a different culture, different norms and rules, and that's fine as well. They should learn that. Okay, so I agree with that. But to say that Muslims aren't doing or immigrants don't do it, that's not true, because, we've got so many immigrants here, and the country has got a worker shortage, and we've got aging population. We need these immigrants and we need these workers. And, like I mentioned, we've got so many Muslims serving in so many different industries, so many different posts in the public sector and the private sector. And that is what true integration is. You're giving back and they're paying taxes. The people who are like billionaires, millionaires, some, who aren't paying their taxes, who have got tax havens, that's what the far right should be railing against, rather than the Muslims who are working in the NHS, in jobs, in the public sector. And, and the irony in all of this is that the people who, scapegoat minorities and Muslims the most, they're the ones who are actually a threat to the country. They're the ones who actually are against British culture and Christian values. Yeah. Arguably, Muslims are upholding Christian values more than the far right, because the far right is full of hate towards others, whereas Muslims are the ones who are, giving the charity, who are serving the country, who are... And by the way, look, there is a caveat here. There are some immigrants and some Muslims who do come or who are already here and they commit crimes or they do, things which are against the country, right? And obviously we condemn that. Obviously every Muslim condemns that. And obviously they should be subject to the full force of the law. So we don't disagree with them on that. And we don't say every single immigrant or Asian or Pakistani or Muslim is an angel.
Of course, yeah.
That's just not reality. But don't just scapegoat everyone and tarnish everyone with the same brush. And so what I was saying is the irony of it is that Tommy Robinson himself, who was the leader of these marches, who organized this march.
He's a bastion of Christian values.
Yeah, exactly. He's a bastion of Christian values. He wants to bring back Christian values to this country, right? He laments the decline of Christianity. Whose fault is it that Christianity is declining? Why don't you go to the churches rather than, going to these protests and organizing these hate marches? Because that's what the hate marches, right? And he talks about, British values and the respect for the country and stuff. He's the one who's been to prison 5 times. He's the one who doesn't have any respect for British law. He's broken British law. He's been in contempt of court. He defamed a Syrian refugee boy. He was convicted for that, and then he repeated that libel, and then he was in contempt of court and had to go to jail again, right? He has no respect for the rule of law. These guys say that the immigrants come, they don't respect our laws, they don't respect our customs, and they're not patriotic. You're not patriotic because you are going against the country. Yeah. And also, by the way, he's being investigated by the HMRC for not paying his taxes, right? If you're loyal to this country, pay your taxes, give back to the country. And he's also confessed to going bankrupt, spending £100,000 on drinking, on partying, on gambling. And this was while he was receiving donations from his followers. So what kind of values are these? He's defied UK courts. He's been to prison. He's broken British laws. These guys say, oh, this is British country. These are British laws. Abide by British laws yourself. He's not abiding by them. So the audacity to criticize Muslims and immigrants while himself defying UK courts, British law, and also Christian kind of values as well. These aren't Christian values. What, spending 100,000 on drinking, partying, gambling? Come on. So people need to know this. They need to know who you're following. So it's him who's a threat to British and Christian culture and values,
Yeah.
not Muslims.
Yeah. So lastly, what we'll talk about is the assassination of Charlie Kirk, who was a conservative, ultra right-wing activist and blogger and social media personality in the US. So he was actually shot. There was it was a university event going on outside the Utah Valley University, and he was actually talking there. And ironically, he was given a question about the gun laws, the Second Amendment, for which he actually stood up for, and he's on record saying that it's fine if some people die for this Second Amendment. But after this question, he was giving his answer, and he was shot in the neck, very graphic footage, and he passed away. Now, this raises a huge question because of his outrageous views, which he held in his lifetime. A lot of people were seen celebrating his death. A lot of Muslims were even seen, or some Muslims were even seen celebrating his death. Now, here, a huge question that people have been asking is, as Muslims, how should we respond to his killing? Because, of course, his views were outrageous. He is on record saying outrageous things against the Holy Prophet, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, peace be upon him. He called him a warlord, and he said much more vile and hurtful things, which I'm not going to repeat here right now. So when he was shot, people were celebrating. Of course, that was wrong. I really liked one thing that Mehdi Hassan said about this. He said that we can do two things at once. We can walk and chew gum. We can condemn his killing because no one deserves to die that way. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that he was a very good person. The views that he held were very wrong. And we can still criticize those views without celebrating, of course, his death. So what would you say about this?
I think you've answered everything. I don't think there's much more for me to add. Like
it was really good the way that he sort of encapsulated it.
Yeah,
in
exactly.
that sentence.
And I think that's like we can condemn his killing and condemn his views as well. Like those two things can go hand in hand. There's nothing. And the thing is, as a Muslim journalist, I obviously value free speech. My whole industry, my whole work is based upon free speech. Everything we're doing here right now. So everyone has the right to free speech, but I don't believe that hate speech is free speech. I don't believe that you can use your right to free speech to demonize other people, to spread hate, to kind of spread lies as well. Because the stuff he said about Islam, the stuff he said, like you mentioned, about the founder of Islam, peace be upon him, and that is a misuse of free speech. And that's not justified. And even in the free speech laws, there are provisions there that free speech can and should have limitations for the protection of society. And it's sad that, and it's sad that this is the state of the world we're living in today, that hatred is being spread, and hate will always beget hate, and hatred always leads to violence. And even the killer, he actually said that, he was tired of the hate of Charlie Kirk, and that's why he did it. It's still unjustified. Why? It doesn't make sense to kill someone because of their speech. Fight fire with fire. Don't fight words with weapons. Because, what good has his killing done? It hasn't eradicated racism. It hasn't stopped hate speech.
In fact, it's exacerbated.
It's exacerbated it, right?
Yeah.
So the answer is never violence. The answer is never killing. His killing was horrific, and it was horrendous, and it's unjustified. It's criminal, right? And that's not the answer. And like I said, it didn't achieve anything. At the same time, we have to recognize what led to it. And it's a sad irony that Charlie Kirk's own views and everything he stood for is what has caused this climate. Not just him, but everyone of his kind, or everyone from the far right, the right-wing conservatives, who've created this, through their rhetoric, created this environment of division, of, the gap between the right and left is widening. This climate of hate, this kind of fear of foreigners, this xenophobia, this racism. You've created this hate, which has led to this violence. So the right wing should wake up, and they should be more careful with their words. The thing is, when it comes to free speech, I have no issue with criticizing somebody else's beliefs or even someone else's faith, as long as it's done in a respectful way. And there's a very fine line. And in fact, it's not a fine line. It's very clear that, look, it's very obvious when someone is free. The whole point of free speech is to have intellectual discourse and to have intellectual progress. But when you're using your free speech to mock others, to deride others, to demonize minorities, then that does not come under free speech. It's not legitimized under free speech. So this should all be a moment for us to reflect that, the kind of hatred that is being spread is going to lead to violence. And it always starts with rhetoric. It always starts with speech. And that always leads to violence. And if we want to stop violence, we need to stop the hateful rhetoric that is being spread, which Charlie Kirk became a victim of himself. And his views were really vile. They were racist. If you just look at some of the stuff that he said about black people.
So I've actually got them right here. So I've got a couple of quotes that I'll read out. He said about black pilots, he said, if I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. So he was clearly against black
Exactly.
people.
What kind of comment is that?
About black women, he said that regarding them, he said, you do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go and steal a white person's slot to be taken somewhat seriously. Then we have regarding empathy, he said, I can't stand the word empathy actually. I think empathy is a made up new age term that does a lot of damage.
He's claiming to stand up for Christian values.
Yeah, stand up for Christian values. Not only that, but also free speech. So you have Mehdi Hassan. He said that Mehdi Hassan, he made a remark which, of course, was Charlie Kirk wasn't a big fan of, and he said that he should be deported. So Mehdi Hassan is an American resident, citizen. He said he should be deported. So why is he now saying that he should be deported?
These are double standards. The right wing, the far right in the USA, and Trump and MAGA movement, their free speech has completely double standards. It's free speech when it suits them.
Yeah.
It's free speech when it aligns with their views. Otherwise, it's a prisonable offense.
Yeah.
The Palestinian protesters, anyone who criticizes Israel, they're either deported, they're threatened, or they're jailed, or they're labeled anti-Semitic.
Yeah.
Where's their free speech gone now?
Speaking of Palestine, he didn't even recognize it as a country, even Gaza as a place as well.
Yeah, exactly.
He said George Floyd was a scumbag. And regarding guns, like I mentioned, he said that even if some people die for the Second Amendment to be upheld, then it should happen. But regardless of all of this, despite him saying all of this and us being very, very against his views, that still doesn't mean that, we should now not feel sympathy for his wife and his 2 children, or that we should celebrate his killing. Of course not. We condemn that outright.
It doesn't justify his death,
No,
right? It doesn't
yeah.
justify killing someone. You can't go around killing someone and do this kind of vigilante justice. Not justice, right? It's kind of, you're causing more chaos and disorder. If you start killing everyone who you don't agree with, what's going to happen in society? It's going to be chaos. It's going to be civil war. And that's not conducive to a peaceful society, which is what everyone should be and is trying to work for. And the thing is, like, celebrating it as well. What's the point in celebrating his death? It's sad that somebody has died and violence has happened. And, as a Muslim, if you're celebrating it, celebrating is actually a very temporary, short-term, reactionary response. It's an emotional response. What's the point in celebrating it? What we should be doing is taking a step back and analyzing why this has happened and how to stop this happening again. This is a pivotal moment in the whole of the Western world, actually, where hate speech, and the funny thing about hate speech is that hate speech doesn't just radicalize your own people. So Charlie Kirk's hate speech wouldn't have just radicalized his own people to hate minorities and immigrants and Muslims. It also radicalized the people he's demonizing and speaking out against, which has led to this violence and this killing. So hate speech, creates violence and divisions, and celebrating it won't do any good to anyone. He's dead now. What are you going to do? You don't destroy or remove an ideology by killing one person or 10 people or 10,000 people. You remove an ideology by dismantling their arguments, by using more powerful logic and arguments to counter their arguments. That's the only way. And so it doesn't make sense, right? And you're just causing more anarchy. And the people who are celebrating, I won't celebrate his life either, right? The people who are celebrating his life on the right wing and that, he was this figure and, there's nothing there to celebrate. Because what did he spread? He didn't spread anything good, did he? But as a Muslim, we believe that now he's dead and now he's going to be accountable to God. His affairs with God now. So there's no point, celebrating it, but at the same time, I'm not going to condone what he did in his life either.